Today, we're reviewing professional standards and the GAAS hierarchy. This topic can feel like a giant list of acronyms, but there's actually a simple way to organize it. Before deciding which professional standards apply, ask yourself two questions. What type of engagement is being performed, and what type of entity is involved? Those two questions will usually point you toward the correct standards. Let's start with audits. For an audit of a private company, nonprofit organization, or another non-issuer, think SAS, which stands for Statements on Auditing Standards. SAS is issued by the AICPA's Auditing Standards Board, or ASB, and generally governs audits of entities that are not subject to PCAOB audit requirements, which stands for Public Company Accounting Oversight Board. So remember, for non-issuer audits, think SAS. Now change the entity. If we're auditing an issuer, meaning a public company subject to PCAOB requirements, we move away from SAS and into PCAOB auditing standards. This distinction is important because an audit question may simply change the type of entity and expect you to recognize that the applicable auditing standards changed with it. Next, we have government audits. Certain government audits follow Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, or GAAS, commonly called the Yellow Book. GAAS is issued by the U.S. Government Accountability Office, or GAO. These standards can apply to audits involving government entities, government programs or activities, and certain organizations receiving government funding when the applicable requirements call for GAAS. So when you see government auditing, think GAAS, Yellow Book, and GAO. Now, not every engagement performed by a CPA is an audit. For an attestation engagement, think SSAE, which stands for Statements on Standards for Attestation Engagements. Attestation engagements can involve a practitioner examining, reviewing, or performing agreed-upon procedures on subject matter or an assertion about subject matter, rather than performing a traditional financial statement audit. For accounting and review services, think SSARS, which stands for Statements on Standards for Accounting and Review Services. SSARS commonly applies when a CPA performs services involving unaudited financial information, including preparations, compilations, and reviews. Here's a quick memory check. SAS for a non-issuer audit, PCAOB for an issuer audit, GAGA for certain government audits. For SSAE, think attestation. For SSARS, think about preparation, compilation, and review. Now here's an audit exam trap. Don't automatically select SAS just because the question says ACPA is performing an engagement. First, identify the engagement. A review is not an audit. An attestation engagement is not an audit. And an audit of an issuer doesn't follow the same auditing standards as an audit of a non-issuer. Standards depend on the situation. There are also standards that govern the CPA profession or CPA firm itself rather than one particular audit. The AICPA Code of Professional Conduct establishes ethical and professional expectations for AICPA members. Think about concepts such as integrity, objectivity, independence, and professional responsibilities. We'll cover the code in much greater detail later. Then we have Statements on Quality Management Standards, or SQMS. Instead of asking, was this one audit performed correctly? Quality management looks at the firm's overall system for consistently performing quality engagements. Think firm-wide policies, procedures, responsibilities, monitoring, and responses to quality risks. A simple distinction is this. Auditing standards help govern the engagement, while quality management standards help govern the firm's system of quality. Now let's move into the hierarchy of auditing guidance. Not every source of auditing guidance carries the same authority. At the highest level are Statements on Auditing Standards for non-issuers and PCAOB Auditing Standards for issuers. These are authoritative auditing standards. Below those are interpretive publications. Interpretive publications help explain how authoritative standards may apply in particular circumstances, but they do not carry the same authority as the auditing standards themselves. Examples can include auditing interpretations, AICPA Audit and Accounting Guidance, and AICPA Statements of Position. Below interpretive publications are other auditing publications. These are the least authoritative category in the hierarchy. They may still be useful, but they are not authoritative auditing standards. Examples can include professional journal articles, auditing textbooks, continuing professional education materials, and other auditing publications. So picture the hierarchy from top to bottom. First, authoritative auditing standards. Second, interpretive publications. A third, other auditing publications. The farther down the hierarchy you go, the less authoritative the guidance becomes. Here's an important exam distinction. Don't assume something is the most authoritative source simply because the AICPA published it. For a non-issuer audit, a statement on auditing standards itself has greater authority than an AICPA interpretive publication. In other words, pay attention to what type of guidance you're looking at, not simply who produced the document. Now let's talk about one of the easiest places for audit questions to get tricky: the words used inside the standards. There are different levels of requirements. If a standard says the auditor must perform something or is required to perform something, think unconditional requirement. If the requirement applies, the auditor doesn't get to simply decide not to follow it. Next is the word should. This is called a presumptively mandatory requirement, and this is a very important distinction. Should does not mean optional. In everyday conversation, should can sound like a suggestion. In auditing standards, it is much stronger. The expectation is that the auditor will comply. In rare circumstances, an auditor may depart from a should requirement, but the auditor needs an appropriate justification, must accomplish the intent of the requirement through alternative procedures, and should appropriately document the departure. So on the exam, don't read, the auditor should, and mentally translate it to, the auditor can do this if they feel like it. That's not what it means. Now compare that with words such as may, might, and could. Those words generally signal explanatory or helpful guidance rather than a professional requirement. They may identify actions or procedures for the auditor to consider. Whether and how those matters apply can depend on the circumstances and the auditor's professional judgment. So listen carefully to the strength of the wording. Must or is required to means unconditional. Should means presumptively mandatory. May, might, or could point toward guidance or matters to consider. That one-word difference can completely change an audit answer. Now let's return to interpretive publications. An auditor should consider applicable interpretive guidance when determining how authoritative auditing standards apply to an engagement. If the auditor takes a different approach, the important question becomes whether the auditor still satisfied the underlying requirements of the authoritative standards. Think of it this way. The auditing standard tells you what must be accomplished. Interpretive guidance can help explain how that standard may apply. Finally, remember the distinction between GAAS and GAAP. GAAS relates to auditing. It governs how the auditor plans, performs, and reports on an audit. GAAP relates to financial reporting. It governs how financial information is recognized, measured, presented, and disclosed. So if an audit question asks about the auditor's performance, think GAAS. If it's talking about the accounting framework used to prepare the financial statements, think GAAP. Let's finish with a rapid review. Non-issuer audit, SAS. Issuer audit, PCAOB. Certain government audits, GAGAS. Attestation engagement, SSAE. Preparation, compilation, or review, SSARS. CPA ethics and professional behavior, AICPA Code of Professional Conduct. Firm-wide system of quality management, SQMS. For the hierarchy, auditing standards are the most authoritative. Then come interpretive publications. Then other auditing publications. And finally, watch the wording. Must means must. Should does not mean optional. May, might, and could point toward guidance or matters requiring consideration and professional judgment. Audit loves small wording changes, so don't just ask yourself whether an answer sounds reasonable. Ask yourself, what exactly is the question asking? And how strong is the language being used?